Okay, it's the first weekend in April and we join the rest of the world to mark World Autism Day. If you just tuned in, this is Today with John and Helen on PlusTvAfrica, and you are welcome. Besides learning about autism from our guests, the other segments of the program, as you know, will be served to you hot and exciting.
As always.
As always, yes.
But is it the first weekend?
It is.
Is it? I think you've lost count.
Today is 9th.
Well, anyhow, so much has happened.
Yeah, because we were not here last week. Oh,
so much has happened, since we were here, and now at least we need to catch up quickly on some events during the week. I won't even go as far as during the week.
This morning.
Last night.
Okay. The
national grid, electricity supply, I hear is down again. Second time in 4 weeks. What's going on? What is going on?
What is going on?
I think we need to get better explanation on this, because it's not something we just brush aside. A whole nation, Nigeria, the national electricity grid goes down twice, and we're not hearing that heads have rolled.
Yeah.
Helen.
Well, if that is the direction you're going, because better explanation we got the first time, the second time, but except that heads haven't rolled. And probably that's why we're back here.
I don't know what to say, but all I know is that a lot of people are suffering.
True.
And
very true.
Something has to give.
Very true, because power is extremely, extremely important.
Enough of this. There's no point, dancing around. People don't enjoy it. I don't know about you.
Nobody enjoys to be put in darkness. Nobody enjoys because there's so many things that are tied to electricity, to power supply. And when the power is not there, a lot of things are wrong.
Yeah. What was the other thing you wanted to talk about?
Unfortunately, a lot of things are wrong. It's not only power. Last week, I had an opportunity to go to First Act Town. You won't believe it. I missed my way. I was almost at the trade fair complex before I had to talk. Well, someone would say, use your Google map. Sometimes Google map will fail you because the express road keeps just taking you, up the bridge, and you're going, and then before you know it, you are way past where you're supposed to.
Sightseeing for you.
And then I started asking, and then I had to be diverted under the bridge. That was a makeshift route and very dangerous. It was like going under the bridge with mechanic workshop and everything. And I asked myself, what does it take to just put some direction? Signages. The road is being worked upon. So let's have some just signposts directing us to what's happening and where we need to go. Yeah. If there was a new person in Lagos, I mean, I've lived in Lagos for so long. So if I can go through that.
Helen, we expect you to use your intuition.
God have mercy.
Well,
and finally, before we jump into our main topic today, so many people are crying. You are still able to use your telephone, aren't you?
Oh, yes.
Because
I did what I had to do when I did it.
There's a lot of confusion right now.
A lot of people didn't do what they should have done, and they're suffering for it now.
And they're saying that the notice was absolutely short.
The notice wasn't short.
Dangerously short.
Helen, the truth is that the notice was not short. We all have been sensitized, advised, notified about doing all these things many years.
Okay.
And we refused to do it.
And as many as 72 million subscribers are going back and forth.
Because we don't do what we are supposed to do when we should do it.
Until the last minute.
I personally, I'm sorry, but I have no sympathy. Because we all should have done this thing long ago.
All right, so we haven't. A lot of us haven't done that, and we are in this.
I hope some people will have my head.
We're in this problem. So please, can we appeal for a little time? All right, maybe maybe if we stretch this a little while, so that the confusion at the NIN offices and the various registration centers, will be bearable.
It's interesting.
So many people are losing money.
It's interesting being
businesses online are shut down.
It is interesting being Nigeria. Helen, in May 2014, the 67th World Health Assembly adopted a resolution providing legal backing, actually, for comprehensive and coordinated efforts for the management of autism spectrum disorder. This was supported by more than 60 countries.
And so to spread the word and to be the voice for those voiceless people living with this disorder, we have decided to dedicate today's edition of the program to talking and learning more about it. And to help us with facts, figures, and other information is an autism spectrum disorder specialist. And she's here with us in the studio.
Yes, our guest is dedicated to promoting the inclusion of people with special needs. She's a trainer of teachers, caregivers, and parents on how to give care to sufferers. Our guest works with individuals and organizations to dismantle undesirable behaviors, install healthy ones, uphold development and mental health for all. She stands tall as an applied behavioral analyst and certified autism specialist. Welcome with us to the program, Doyinsola Jawando-Adebomehin. You're welcome, madam.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having
and
me.
we dragged you out
Nice
of
to
bed
have
this
you.
morning.
Well, it's all good cause.
It's all for the people.
You survived the rain.
I did.
Good.
Okay.
Yes.
So people always resort to stereotypes due to their lack of understanding of autism spectrum disorder. What does it feel like being there, being someone who is crusading, for everything that is about this disorder?
All right. Thank you so much. Autism, like they say, is a faceless disorder. You can't tell.
Faceless.
It's faceless. You can't tell a person who is living with this disorder simply by looking at them, because it doesn't show on the face. It's not like the Down syndrome that has the look. There's usually or cerebral palsy that you can tell simply by looking at them. For autism, you really can't tell, and we've done that several times. Have pictures of children in an inclusive setting, and we put it out there and say, identify those who have autism. You can't tell from a picture, but you can tell from a video.
Okay.
That thing that shows the motion, you can tell, because it's usually more in what they do than in how they look. And yes, we still have that stereotype there where almost every child that's evolving is labeled as having autism by other people simply because they're doing one thing or the other. Perhaps because they're running around, or they're not listening when the adult is speaking or when another child is speaking. But that usually is not enough to label them with autism. There's specific things that help identify a person living with autism. And there are three basic things, really. One is they have challenges with making eye contact and with communicating with people. They have challenges sometimes with speech. So they're unable to communicate appropriately. Sometimes they don't have words. Other times they don't use the words in sentences. So there's a problem with the communication. There's a problem with joint attention. So if I have a child, if I was here with autism, it doesn't matter what you're doing. I probably would not pay attention to it, except if it's one of my pet peeves. Then I would almost be fixated on it. So social interaction is also another one. So there's communication, there's social interaction. And then the third is they tend to have certain acts, behavior that they do repeatedly. It could be spinning around, it could be flapping their fingers, it could be looking out of the side of their eyes, it could be lining things up. They tend to do that a lot. It could be lining little cars up or models, those little toy soldiers, or even shoes or bags. They like to have things in a specific way. Sometimes they're fixated on the door being shut all the time. So it doesn't matter how far they are from the door, they stand up to shut the door whenever a door is open. Sometimes it's with flicking switches. So they go into an environment, and under 20 minutes of being in a big space, they've already identified where all the switches are, because that for them is a major thing. They get a lot of input from that, so they do it a lot. And most of the things they tend to do are things that in our own setting as Nigerians, Africans, are unacceptable, really. So a child comes into the environment and comes and touches you, picks your bag, you know, do all of that. In the Western world, sometimes they don't have too much of a problem with that. But here, they're really big deals where you don't, you have to listen when the person is talking to you. As a child, you have to sit still. I have to just look at you. But our children, because they do not have those skills, because in their development, they tend to be in a space of their own, so they tend not to learn by immersion the way every other person would learn. So that really, you need the communication challenge, you need the joint attention challenge, and you need some of those repetitive behavior. All three have to be in place for you to diagnose a person as autism, living with autism.
This is such a broad spectrum.
It is a very broad spectrum.
Very broad spectrum.
Because where you have some who are at the high end, where they have major challenges with communication, with interaction. We also have those on the lower end that have the low level autism. Those are usually very, very intelligent people, and they fall in the category called the Asperger's. And so what they do, if you don't know the basic signs for autism, you would have a challenge identifying them as people with autism.
We'll come to that, you know, because I teach body language as part of what I do, and I see this as an advanced state of communication. You know, you're speaking without words, you know, so you have to understand the language. You know, I know that we will not be able to exhaustively treat this spectrum and all of that, you know, in 30 minutes or 1 hour, you know, but it's something of huge interest, you know, for some of us. Now, autistic people zone out of impulses we hear, you know, in different ways. It's called, I think it's called masking. Okay, you want to tell us a bit about this masking?
Okay, autism as it were on its own, it's from a word that says self, alone. And autism is a neurological disorder that causes there to be a break somewhere in the transmission of information from the stimulus to the brain and then back. So where that happens, one of the things that is significant with people living with autism is that they tend to be in a world of their own. And being in the world of their own, talking about body language, you know, body language is a learned thing at the end of the day. It's determined by what environment you have been in for a while, because you pick it simply by being in that environment. Because they are into themselves, because they zone out very, very often. They tend not to identify what would be the ideal way the people in that environment to say no, by simply shaking their head. So they don't identify that. So they tend not to do it. So with them, the body language communication is most likely not going to pass the test, because they're not looking anyway. So we need to, those are concepts that they need to learn. And that's part of where the therapy comes in at the end of the day. But they're usually on their own, they zone out, and they prefer to be there. Because I usually say to parents, I don't know if this is a fact, but I usually say to parents that, so you have 3 children, and one of them is living with autism, and the other 2 are typical. So I, who is living with autism, when I feel like, when I wish to come out, I see that when my sibling has done something inappropriate, they get scolded. But I don't have to say anything. All I have to do is go, and I get everything. Why should I come out and do anything with you? I'd rather just be in there where I keep getting the majestic treatment and all of that. But that's not, there's no theory that says that, but that's just me putting that out there. But they're more of into themselves, and they tend not to engage with people. They tend not to show that they see what's happening in the environment sometimes. And so they tend not to do what they're expected to do.
They remain in their bubble.
Yes. For you to work with them, for you to get them to live a functional life, you need to teach them all of these things that from where they should have started. So you don't work with a person with autism and say, okay, this is a 4-year-old, so I'm going to teach you how to say good morning. It doesn't usually work that way. Before you teach me how to say good morning, you have to get me to look, to identify. You have to get me to learn the language. You know, I start off by saying g, and then that's beautiful, well done. Then after a while, I as a therapist would insist on you saying more than g. So now I want to hear goo. So when you give me goo, I'm like, super, you've done really well. And then I move on again, and then I now start asking for good. Meanwhile, where we're going is, good morning. How are you today, John? But we will start off the little bits, and then we'll piece it all together until we get to the bigger thing. So that's where the therapy comes in. That's what the therapy does for it, because at the end of the day, there's no cure to autism, really. It's a lifelong thing, but it can be managed. The concepts that they have not learned at all in the years of before the therapy can be taught to them in little bites. It's called chunking down. So we chunk it down, and then we give it to them on a regular, and it's repetitive and it's continuous, and we build up as we go along the line, and they learn it. Now, you and I would, someone says good morning to us, would automatically respond, good morning, you know, not because we were really great, but because we've done it over time. At the beginning, we learned that that was meant to be the response. We gave it, we got good feedback that made us happy, so we did more of it. So now we've done it over and over and over and over again, so it's now permeated the whole of us. It has now become a habit.
Yes.
So we do the same thing with them, introduce to them in little bites until we encapsulate the whole thing, and we do it repetitively, so it becomes a habit to them, and then they do it spontaneously. So that begins to mask the autism, the behavior that they initially did not have, that we're trying to build.
Yes.
And then, but there's one part of it that usually never goes away, and that is the repetitive behavior. It doesn't go away totally, but it changes. So today I could be flapping my fingers, and then if you taught me how to modify it, because this is not socially acceptable.
Yeah.
So you help me understand that, oh, if you go out there, it doesn't matter how smart you are and everything. If you did this, people would distance themselves from you. So you could teach me to, instead of do this, I could just do this every now and then, you know. And then as time goes on, I could transfer it, and then, you know, just continue to change the things that I do until I find one that works for me and that is socially acceptable.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, that's awesome. And you know, as you talk about this, what's going on in my mind is, this is serious.
It is.
And from statistics and research, there are loads of people, young and old, who are going through or who are in this place. And I don't know how aware the environment is of them. And you also mentioned earlier on, there's an emotional, you know, thing, that the expression for them is more emotional than it is physical, you know. So, why is this emotional thing, you know, so important for some of us who are individuals and for caregivers, you know, to understand?
All right. I would say that it's really important for us as people on the outside to understand, because inability to understand the people living with autism, to connect with them, to help them evolve, develop their skills and evolve, is a major loss to the world, and definitely to Nigeria, because these group of people tend to be people who, once they learn a skill, once they're able to acquire it, they deliver excellence. And not just once, but because they do what they have learned over and over and over again, they tend to deliver a certain level of excellence repeatedly every time they did it. There are people who are creative, that once you're able to identify who they are, what they like to do, how they function, and you plug in certain gaps, you would get different versions of things. So they are actually they would serve as great models once we're able to tap into their skills, and they would be there for the world to learn from. So we need to learn. We are the ones who need to upgrade ourselves so that we're able to communicate with them, connect with them, and to teach them so that they're able to do. Now, having said that, it is really important because inability to understand who they are, to identify that they are able, they are not disabled, they're just different, really. So for us to understand that they are able to do whatever it is that they can do, and that we want them to do to a certain extent, we will have them remain in the world, and really, them being in the world, not learning the skills that they need to socialize, is a time bomb waiting to happen. So they will grow. A child living with autism, if left unaddressed, is going to grow up into an adult living with autism. If you have a young child living with autism, the really active ones amongst them, you would need to be on your toes. You would move. You would run. You would try to catch a lot of things that they're throwing up. And that is a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. Imagine when you have to do that with a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 17-year-old. And they will evolve. It's a matter of time. There's nothing anybody can do about that. So it's really important for us to learn how to work with them. And it's more important for us to learn to work with them appropriately. Because like I said, what they do, they continue to produce. So if we have had someone administer a certain learning to them that is not appropriate, that's not wholesome, that is not ecological, then we would have an individual, a child living with autism today, evolve into someone who has learned to do what is not wholesome, what is not ecological. And that is not safe for any environment at all.
Now, something just raced through my mind. You know, I know that in the past we may have wrongly tagged autism sufferers. Can I call them sufferers?
Well,
autism
people living with autism.
People living with autism.
Right.
Tagged them wrongly. Sometimes we say, "Oh, it's this one or this that." Do we have any figures as to, for Nigeria, what the population will be?
Well, unfortunately, we do not have figures because I think we don't. Organizations are just beginning to come together to carry out the research to put it together because, again, you know, by virtue of the labels, the tags that people had given to people living with autism, spiritual tags. Oh, the mother was a prostitute, that's why she had this child, she was cursed. Oh, that one stole. Oh, that one did not do this. Oh, that one was a nasty mother, she was a useless mother, she wasn't there for the child. There's that thing they call the refrigerator baby concept of a mother who did not attend to the child as a baby, so the child did not get the warmth and the love, so the child grew up with autism. There are many different versions out there. In Africa, there was a conference that we attended in Ghana. It was a West African Autism Association, and even then we didn't have figures. Even now we still don't really have the figures, but we found out that in different places there was a uniformity. People living with autism disorder or any other such neurological or physical disorders were cursed and they only needed to be killed. So those who were bold enough, the families that were bold enough, gave them up for killing. Some actually did it themselves, and others that were not bold enough, that knew that this person is a part of us, just simply locked them behind closed doors.
You know what?
That must be something that's happening.
We will lock those thoughts there for now, because we need to go on a break.
Yes, we need to go.
We'll take a break now, and we'll be back shortly. Don't go away. So the program is today with John and Helen, and we join others to mark World Autism Day, helping you understand better what the condition is all about and the challenges facing sufferers. Is a specialist who is here with us, Doyinsola Jawando-Adebomehin. Yeah?
Adebomehin.
Adebomehin.
Jawando-Adebomehin.
Yeah, but I think I tried. I did.
Oh, you did. You got the pronunciation.
How can you be trying? You're a broadcaster.
Well.
You're a broadcaster. How can you be trying?
So yeah, welcome again.
Thank
welcome
you very
to
much.
the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So much has been said about this condition, and the last statement you made, I want to believe that is not what is obtainable now.
I think it's so much better because I spoke to about 3 parents. We had a parents meetup recently, just last weekend, and 2 parents did mention that it appears that there's so many people now living with autism out there. And one of them said, while she was discussing that with another person, that the person said, you know, the reality is that people are actually just catching on to understand that it is not a sin, it's not something to be killed for, and so they're actually allowing them out. So they have been there, and it has existed from time immemorial, at least. I don't know how far back, but my immediate younger brother, he would have been 46, 47 now. He passed on about 3 years ago. He lived with autism until he passed on, you know. And so I know, my family knows that autism has existed for over 40 years. Yeah. Even though we didn't know what it was, you know.
So some people believe or fear that vaccines put their children at risk of autism. Is there a fact, any truth in this?
There's no fact. I think the studies will just continue to go on because it's been debunked a number of times. But what it is, there really is a, like they say, there's no smoke without fire, you know, sometimes, is that the age at which the autism in a child begins to emerge, to show, is the age at which they take those vaccines that are in question. So even if a child did not take the vaccination, they just needed anything to trigger it up because the traits would have been inherent. The disorder is not there at the beginning. It comes out because you find that there are children who grow just like their typical peers. And then they get to a point and the sound, the speeches that they had started to make, the mama, dada, mommy, give me, everything begins to diminish until they lose all the words. Some of them would have actually started to make sentences, you know, engaging properly, and they find out that the eye contact begins to go away, the speech begins to reduce, gets to phrases, short phrases, goes to single words, and then it totally stops. So anything can trigger it off. Some of the things that have been said to trigger it off have been traumas, you know. And sometimes it's not just the negative trauma. It's not, oh, I hit my head. Sometimes it's just so much excitement, you know. Sometimes has been known to also trigger it off, and then they go there. So the tip, I mean, share the tip is to pay closer attention to our children and to identify when something begins to change so that we can nip it in the bud. And while the age that autism usually comes out or shows is usually about a year to maybe about 4 or 5 years, there have been cases that the autism emerged at 13 years. Yes. So these things are there, and we're just finding out a lot more about it. There's a lot more information out there in the West because, I mean, they embraced it a long while ago, so they see a lot more.
Information.
So information. So it's coming on, and now organizations are beginning to try to get information in order for us to know exactly what it is we're dealing with and know how to address it better, and also to help the government make policies that are, you know, binding and that would help us help the people living with autism evolve. And once there's a lot of necessary attention to the disorder, then many other disorders would also get what it is that they need to get, because each of these people living with these disorders can live a functional life.
You appear to be such a knowledge
you introduce
knowledge bank
who is a specialist in this.
Yes. Now I want to imagine that a lot of people, you know, will scramble here and there for education, for knowledge. What would you where would you advise
that they
us
go
to look for education on autism?
In Nigeria.
In Nigeria.
All right. So there are a number of centers that, because at the end of the day, the government is not really able to do much about it yet, so individuals are taking it up. So the special needs centers who have been advocating for a while and are now beginning to also train and all of that. So the Learning Place Center is one, Patrick Speech Center in Ikeja is another one, and there are very many others like that. At the same time, there are also parents or people living with autism who have come together, you know, to help parents understand what autism is, how to deal with it at home. Because I work at a center, your child comes to center, at the most, your child would have like the extended autism therapy in a week. For you to say my child is getting therapy that makes sense, it has to be a minimum of 20 hours, right?
In a week?
In a week, yes. Minimum of 20 hours. So a minimum of 20 hours. Sometimes we have those who do the extensive, so they take 40 hours. So even if your child is getting 40 hours in a week and comes to my center where I work, the child is going to be there for a maximum of 8 hours. They still have 16 hours of which they'll probably sleep for another 8 hours. So 8 hours go to the parents. So the parents also need to know what it's about, to understand it and to be equipped to deal with it, so that the child continues to get intervention everywhere they go. So the parents, there's a group that API at Autism Parent, no, SPI, Parents Against Autism Initiative. So they also have sessions getting parents together, informing them on what it is, taking questions, equipping them, and also providing the comfort and sometimes the tools for them to work with.
Wow,
So
there's a lot.
There are lots of other centers, and schools as well are beginning to embrace it.
Yeah.
You know, a lot more schools are more inclusive now, and Lagos State really has been trying along that path as well.
That's good.
I think they have about at least 13 inclusive schools in different parts of Lagos where a child with autism or any other disorder goes to, and then they get their needs met. It's evolving as well, and one of such is the Maryland school, where the school that I work with has actually adopted that school, and so we work with the government. And we also do a CSR where we train the specialists in the Lagos State schools. One of such is coming up this week, and it's holding at the Maryland school as well. So there's quite a lot that's happening.
Going on, yes.
Individuals are working, professionals are working, parents are working, and government is beginning to get on board. I know that Lagos State government has been trying, but the federal government still has a long way to go.
Yeah. Okay, when you were talking about the traits and how we can identify children or people who probably are in this category, you talked about the need for them, that they are more attentive to some things that, you know, can I use the word ordinary people, that a lot of us, typical people would not like, music, like turning off the lights and all of that. What is it about? What
they have, very quickly. One of the things, again, that has been identified with them is they tend to have sensory processing disorders. Okay. So for them, the senses are heightened in certain parts. Certain parts of the senses are heightened, such that I don't know where the toilet is here, but if a person living with autism was here and that was their own challenge, if they flush that toilet perhaps two buildings away, they would hear it. And so those are some of the things that trigger them off, and they begin, you know, to get flustered. And then people say, oh, these people, they're just aggressive, they just begin to shout. There's always a reason. We are not privy to the reason why they do it, but there's always a reason. So what we as professionals do, what we have been trained to do, is to identify the reason. That thing that child did, what is the function? What was he trying to do? Now, what could have happened that he was trying to avoid or to get more of? And then that's now what helps us identify the kind of, this is now ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which says that there has to be a reward for you to engage anybody, really. But that part has been zeroed down to people living with special needs and autism. And so what that means is, so I find a child who just continues to jump or to push other children or to bump into them. And I observe him collect data, analyze the data. He does it at this time of the day more. he does it more with this kind of people and everything. I try to identify what could be the motivation. There could be many reasons. It could be that he's wanting to play with them. It could be that that shirt that person likes, the person likes stripes, the child is reacting to it. They could be attracted to it. They could find it very, very revolting. You know. So once we identify what that is, we now begin to get that person to tweak a bit or to tweak something around it, and also to encourage the child living with autism to, when they try to do a little bit of what I want them to do, then they get a bit of reward. The reward is anything that they like to do.
Interesting.
Administered to them in little quantities for little times, but they are not really able to identify that. Oh, I just got, for instance, when we're working with them, you could have a slice of, you know, those small Ritz biscuits, and then because we're not trying to feed them fat really, we're just trying to get them at a level where they're happy and they'll attend better. We could break one of those little cublet Ritz biscuits into 10 bits, where we have to pick it up with a little teaspoon, you know. But to them, when you give it to them, they have the notion, because they've seen the biscuit in there, and they have the notion, well, I'm having this biscuit, so they take it, and then we do a little bit more work, and then you give them a little bit. So they are in that position, they're in that state of mind where they're happy, they're looking forward to the next one, so they're looking at you, so they're doing what you want them to do, not because they like it or they like you, but because they want a little bit more of that. So I give you a little bit more, you give me a little more, and then I give, so it goes that way. But we don't give the same quantity every time, because so now every 2 times that you give back to me what I want you to give, then you get a reward. Then every 3 times, and it spaces out that way. So that's
wow. You know, we said it earlier.
Time is out. Completely out.
We never have enough time for.
But what this says to me is that we need a lot more people who are well informed and educated about this syndrome than we have.
We do.
You know, we do. And we just like to thank you at this point.
Thank you so much.
You've been so helpful. I have learnt a lot this morning. And thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
On the show.
Well, I'll thank you by attempting to call your name properly. Doyinsola Jawando-Adebomehin.
Got it right.
Thank you so much for coming.
You've been practicing it.
Okay.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes, so I think it should be the fitness segment now.
Yeah. We have learned so much on this segment so far.
Let's jump into the fitness segment, and after that, you know that Pharaoh will be here with her guest to talk about something equally interesting. So let's join Dolly, I believe, in the gym.